They say every love story starts with a spark. Mine started with a contract, a cold handshake, and a man who looked at me like I was a problem he couldn't solve. I didn't marry him for love. I married him because my company was drowning, and his father had the power to pull me out. But if there's one thing life taught me, it's this: even the coldest deals can burn you alive. Before him, my world smelled like coffee, street food, and hard work. I was born in Guadalajara, daughter of a music teacher and a woman who believed laughter fixed almost everything. We didn't have much, but we had music. Every Friday night, our small living room turned into a dance floor. And I danced like I owned the world, because for a few hours I really did. Then came the years of hustle. The late nights. The clients who smiled at my accent but loved my results. And for a while, I thought success would be enough. The day I met him, I was wearing my favorite red jacket, the one my mom said made me look like trouble. He was late, of course. When he walked into the meeting room, time froze. Perfect suit, colder eyes. The kind of man who never needed to raise his voice to make people listen. "Miss Alvarez," he said, not even looking up from his tablet. "You're the one asking for the merger, correct?" And I smiled, not the polite kind, but the Mexican kind. The one that says, "You don't scare me." "Yes," I said. "And you're the one who thinks money makes the world spin, right?" He looked up, and for a second, I swear, I saw him smirk. Just a little. That was the first time we met. The man who would become my husband, and the reason I'd learned that pride can look a lot like love if you stare long enough. 2 weeks after that meeting, I got a call. No, good morning. No, how are you? Just his voice saying, "Miss Alvarez, my father wants to meet you." And that's how I found myself sitting in a glass office, surrounded by people who looked like they were born knowing how to judge you. His father, Chairman Han, spoke like every word was worth a stock share. He wanted a merger. He wanted stability. And, apparently, he wanted me to marry his son to make it happen. When his father left the room, it was just the two of us. Silence. The kind that weighs more than words. He leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on me. "It's simple," he said. "A 1-year marriage. You get access to our investors, I get the image my father wants. No emotions. Just business." I laughed. Loudly. Because honestly, who proposes marriage like he's buying furniture? "You're unbelievable," I said. "So are you," he replied. "That's why this might actually work." We met again a week later, to discuss terms. He ordered for me before I could open the menu. Spicy seafood noodles. "No cilantro," he said to the waiter. I blinked. I'd mentioned that once in passing between arguments, and he remembered. When the food arrived, he didn't say a word. Just pushed the bowl toward me, quietly. That was the moment I realized something dangerous. Cold men don't forget the details that warm them. I told myself it was just a deal. 1 year. No love, no complications. But deep down I knew. Nothing about him would ever stay, just business. I used to imagine my wedding day with music, colors, my mama crying, my friends dancing barefoot. But that day, my real wedding, felt like a board meeting with flowers. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. White roses, gold chandeliers, people smiling just enough to hide the gossip in their eyes. And him, standing at the altar, like he was closing another deal. When I walked down the aisle, I could feel hundreds of eyes scanning me, not to admire, but to measure. Every step whispered, "She doesn't belong here." When the priest asked if I took him to be my husband, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurdly poetic. He looked at me, steady, unreadable. And for a second, I saw it, a flicker of doubt. Maybe he realized this was the first thing in his life he couldn't fully control. "I do," he said first. Cold, perfect. Then it was my turn. And I said it too. Not because I meant it, but because in that moment I refused to look weak. During the dinner, his mother didn't even pretend to hide her disgust. "She's a lively," she said, smiling that kind of smile that hurts more than insults. I smiled back, lifted my glass, and replied, "I call it being alive, Mrs. Han. You should try it sometime." The table went silent. Except for him. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw him fight a smile. Later, when the photographers asked for a happy couple photo, he stepped closer, too close, and whispered, "You really shouldn't talk to my mother like that." I smiled again. "Then stop letting her talk to me like that." He didn't answer. But when dessert came, my favorite, tres leches, was waiting at my plate. He'd ordered it. Without saying a word. That night, as the city lights faded behind the car window, I realized something. I hadn't married a man. I'd married a storm pretending to be calm. And maybe that's exactly why I didn't run. The mansion wasn't a home. It was a museum. Every corner polished, every step echoing the weight of money and silence. When I arrived, they didn't even try to hide it. The stares, the whispers, the way every maid paused before greeting me, as if waiting for permission to breathe. Mrs. Han, my new mother-in-law, welcomed me with a smile that could freeze the sun. "I hope you'll learn to adapt," she said. I smiled back. "Don't worry, Senora. I'm very adaptable." That night was my first dinner as a Han. A long table, too many forks, and silence heavy enough to break glass. I tried to start a conversation, asked about a painting, complimented the chef. No one answered, until his sister smirked and said, "Maybe we should teach her how to use chopsticks first." The maids laughed quietly. Even his mother smiled, satisfied. I froze. Not because I didn't know how, but because I knew exactly what that laugh meant. And just when I was about to answer, he spoke. "You should be careful," he said, his tone sharp. "She learns fast. She already knows how to embarrass people without saying a word." The room went silent. His sister's smile vanished. And for the first time, I saw it, him. Standing on my side, no one dared to speak for the rest of dinner. He didn't look at me again, but the air between us had changed. When I stood to leave, I whispered, "You didn't have to do that." He kept his eyes on his glass. "Yes, I did," he said. "They needed to remember who you are." That night, I realized something dangerous. For the first time, someone had defended me in that house, and it was the man I was supposed to never love. 2 months into the marriage, the silence had become a language of its own. We spoke through actions, a nod at breakfast, a note left by the door, a glance that said more than any "good morning." He worked long hours. I pretended not to care. But every night, when he came home, I'd hear the same rhythm, keys, footsteps, and the quiet sound of him stopping by the kitchen before heading upstairs. And every morning, my coffee was already made, just how I liked it. Breakfasts were formal. He read the paper. I talked to the plants by the window just to break the tension. One morning, I joked, "If I ever go missing, at least the orchids will miss me." He didn't even look up. The orchids would probably hire detectives. I smiled. It wasn't romantic, but it was something. Later that week, I burned my hand while cooking. He said nothing, just reached for the first aid kit, took my hand, and wrapped it himself. His touch was careful, almost professional, but his eyes weren't. "You should be more careful," he said.
"Why?"
"You enjoy rescuing me?"
He didn't smile this time.
"Maybe I do." That night, the house felt heavier than usual. We crossed paths in the hallway, just silence, soft footsteps, and the faint scent of his cologne. For a moment, I stopped.
"So, did he?"
No words, just distance and the tension that filled it. He looked at me, not with arrogance, not with anger, just like he was trying to remember something he'd never known. And before I could say anything, he whispered, "Good night, Mrs. Han. They say routine kills love." But ours was different. Our silence was the only thing keeping it alive. 3 months into the marriage, we started working together. It was supposed to be professional, polite smiles, shared schedules, separate lives. But the thing about working with someone who knows how you breathe is that they also know exactly where to hurt you. We were at a board meeting. I'd spent weeks preparing a presentation for an investor. Bold, creative, risky. It could save the project that carried both our names. But halfway through my pitch, one of his father's advisors interrupted me. "She's charming," he said, "but this isn't how we do business in Korea." The room laughed softly. And I waited. I waited for him to say something. But he didn't. He just adjusted his tie, cold and silent. Maybe I did, I said. Because I've earned everything I have, unlike you. Silence. He clenched his jaw, looked away. And that's when I saw it. Under the anger, something else. Jealousy. He didn't say another word. Just drove home in silence, knuckles white on the steering wheel. That night, we didn't talk. Not because we didn't want to, but because if we did, something fragile would break. And maybe it already had. A week after the fight, the house felt like winter. We still lived under the same roof, same hallways, same silence, but it wasn't the same anymore. He left early. I came home late. We passed each other like ghosts with unfinished business. Sometimes I caught him looking at me from across the room, not angry, not sorry, just lost. And that hurt more than the fight ever did. To fill the quiet, I started working longer hours. I missed my music, my dancing, the feeling of belonging somewhere. One night, I found myself humming an old song from home, and I realized I'd forgotten what my own voice sounded like when it was happy. That's when I knew I was disappearing in that mansion. A few days later, he asked me to meet him after work. His voice was calm, polite, too polite. I almost said no. When I arrived, he was standing outside an old building downtown. Through the window, I saw a mirrored room, people dancing. You said you missed it, he said quietly. So, I rented the studio for you. You don't have to go alone. I found a teacher who speaks Spanish. For the first time in weeks, I couldn't find a sarcastic comment. Just silence. My throat burned, but not from anger. You remembered that? I asked. I remember everything you try to hide, he said. That night, for the first time, I danced again. And as I moved, I felt something melt inside me. Not forgiveness, not love, just warmth. The night it happened, the rain didn't stop. The sky felt heavy, like it was carrying everything we'd refused to say. I stayed late at the dance studio, barefoot, moving without music. Each turn felt like trying to spin the anger out of my body. But it stayed.
He stayed too.
I didn't notice him at first, just his reflection in the mirror. Standing there, soaked, silent, watching. How long have you been there? I asked. Long enough to know you dance better when you're angry, he said. I laughed, sharp, bitter. Then you must be very proud of yourself. You're the reason I'm practically a professional now. He took a step closer, slow, careful. That wasn't my intention. No. I snapped. Then what is your intention, Han Jamin? To control me? To fix me? To make me feel small enough to fit in your world? He didn't answer right away. He just looked at me, the way thunder looks at lightning before it breaks. I never wanted to control you, he said finally. I just didn't know how to let someone like you in. For a moment, everything stopped. The rain, my breath, even the space between us. Then why did you marry me? I asked quietly. Because I had to. And now? He hesitated. Because I want to. The words hit harder than thunder. But I couldn't believe him. Not yet. So I turned away, wiped my eyes, and said, then maybe next time, say it before the rain does. And I left him there, in the reflection, standing in his own storm. They say rain washes everything away. But that night it didn't. It just showed us what was still there, and what we were both too afraid to touch. Days passed. No messages. No apologies. No explanations. He went back to his office. I went back to pretending I was fine. But something was different, not in what we said, but in what we didn't. Every silence between us had changed shape. It wasn't cold anymore. It was heavy. We sat across from each other at breakfast, like strangers who'd read the same book but couldn't talk about the ending. He poured coffee for me without asking. I didn't thank him, but I didn't look away either. Every move felt rehearsed, careful, as if one wrong word could send us back into the storm. You're leaving early again? He asked, his voice softer than usual. Work helps me think, I said. And dancing? That helps me forget. He nodded slowly, eyes unreadable, like he wanted to ask something but didn't trust himself to. That evening, when he came home, I was in the kitchen, not waiting, just there. He walked in quietly, took off his coat, and for the first time in a long time, he smiled. Small.
Real.
Almost shy. The studio called, he said. They said you forgot your shoes there. Maybe I wanted an excuse to go back, I said. He looked at me for a second too long. And for the first time, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like possibility. We didn't fix anything that night, but something had shifted, like a door left slightly open after too many days locked. It's strange how peace can feel louder than pain. After weeks of silence, the mansion finally felt quiet. Not the kind of quiet that hurts, the kind that waits. We didn't talk about the rain or the fight or the words that still lived between us. But we didn't need to. Because sometimes love doesn't begin with "I love you." Sometimes it begins with "I'm still here." It was a Sunday morning. I was reading by the window when I smelled it: cinnamon, coffee, vanilla. The kitchen. When I walked in, he was there, sleeves rolled up, trying to make pan dulce. A mess of flour and confusion. "You're going to burn the kitchen?" I said, crossing my arms. "Possibly," he replied, not looking up. "But it's worth the risk." Risk of what? He finally met my eyes. "Making you smile." I didn't. Not right away. But I felt it anyway, that warmth, creeping in like sunlight through a window that's finally open. He handed me a piece of bread, still warm, still imperfect. I took it. And for a long moment, we just stood there, no contracts, no rules, no storm. Just two people learning how to start over, without saying it out loud. "The coffee's still too sweet," I said. "So are you," he answered softly. And maybe that was it. The closest thing to a confession we'd ever have. That morning, the house didn't feel like his anymore. It felt like ours. And maybe that's how love begins. Not with lightning, but with warmth after the rain.